set your mind. Live your life without limits. No more wasting time. Don't forget to stay focused while continuing to stay on the grind. Keep your vision real tight, then your future be bright until the finish line.
Good morning, Living Your Life Without Limits family. Thank you for joining me again this week. I am Shannon Jackson, your resident host. I am so excited about our subject for today. This week's episode is entitled, Let's Talk About Sex. And I am honored to have our special guests with me today, none other than Dr. Shannon Chavez. I want to give you a little bit of background about Dr. Chavez. Dr. Chavez is a licensed clinical psychologist in California and Arizona, and a AASECT certified sex therapist. And the acronym stands for the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselor, and Therapists. She is nationally recognized expert, therapist, educator, specializing in all things sex, and a private practice in Beverly Hills, California called Shape Center, where she works with individuals and couples of all genders and orientation to address sexual concerns and build sexual awareness through therapy, coaching, and education. Dr. Shannon is a national speaker on women's health and has been featured in major news, radio, television programs as a sex and relationship therapist. She has been featured in HuffPost, Reader's Digest, Shape, Women's Health, Men's Health, Latino Perspective, Self Magazine, and the list goes on and on. I cannot list every accolade that this woman, this beautiful woman, inside and out, that is worthy of. But join me as I recognize our honored guest, Dr. Shannon Chavez. Dr. Chavez, thank you so much for being with us today on Living Your Life Without Limits.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited about this topic.
Oh,
thanks for having me.
I am too. A little fun fact, family, we both share the same name. I am so excited about it. So, Dr. Chavez, we're going to get right into the subject here. Why does anybody need a sex therapist?
You know, I think we all need sex therapy, and I think sex and sexual health is part of our overall health and well-being. So I always tell people that 100% of people are going to have sexual concerns at some point in their life. So sex therapy is really a place where you can talk about these issues. It's a lot of skill building. So even if you don't have major concerns or issues, it's a place where you can come and get help, maybe enhancing your sex life, getting some ideas on how to improve your sex life. So sex therapy is for everyone at any stage of life, from all backgrounds. It's really a place to come and talk about sex in a safe place that's judgment-free.
That is excellent. I wanted to include this subject because I do feel there's still a lot of people, there's a taboo around it, whether it's due to religion or just uncomfort within themselves. And I really wanted us to deep dive and kind of go through a few questions. Actually, some of the viewers had sent me some questions regarding sexual health. And so I'm so honored that you bring the knowledge and the experience for us to address some of these concerns. So one of the questions that came up was, what advice or tips can you offer people in relationships that are struggling in the area of sex? Sometimes one partner maybe no longer desires to have sex with their other partner, and that can leave some friction and stress, even tension. And for the person that wants sex and the other partner doesn't, it can also make them struggle, like, what's wrong with me?
Exactly.
What's the problem?
Right.
So talk to us about that.
Yes, couples go through quite a bit of sexual concerns. You're talking about uneven desire, maybe loss of attraction, or how things were sexually at the beginning of the relationship is not where you're at now. So I think there's several things that you can do, and my tips would include really good communication, and that means being able to talk about it without conflict, being able to share and express what your desires and needs are, because they change constantly. So what we used to want or need before is probably not where you're at today, and being able to talk about what those changes are as far as needs and then how to meet those needs. And I think for couples, it's not about agreeing about being the same or meeting each other where you're at when it comes to desire, but being able to go with the flow and changes and being able to negotiate or compromise those needs and how to meet those needs. So I think communication is at the core of all solution for couples' sexual concerns. Because if you can't talk about it, there's not going to be a lot of resolution around how to deal with these issues. So I find for a lot of couples, there may be shame or discomfort around talking about these concerns and really needing a safe space to do that. So when I meet couples for the first time, I often find that that's a big concern for them is coming into a space where they can talk freely about these concerns.
Do you ever have a incident where a person comes into sex therapy? As a couple, the individual want to have that freedom to talk about it, but the other person feels that maybe it's above their sexual boundaries. I don't desire to explore in certain areas where one may want to explore. How do you resolve that?
Right.
Because that happens sometime in relationships where maybe someone is a little bit more, what you want to call it, like free or adventurous, I think is the word to call it, and someone is maybe more conservative.
So when a couple wants to explore, maybe one partner wants to explore and the other isn't really open to it and isn't really sure how to navigate that, what I usually recommend is being able to talk about it and look at meeting each other in the middle. Where's that place where we can maybe look at an alternative to what one partner is wanting and finding that middle ground? I think for most partners, it's about feeling understood. And so when I share my desires or fantasies, I want to be accepted and understood about who I am as a sexual being. And I think for a lot of partners, it's very vulnerable to share what your desires and fantasies are. And especially when you share it with a partner who may be not interested in what that sexual fantasy or desire is, or they are more conservative, and for them it feels a little outrageous or overwhelming to think about acting out in that way sexually. So I think it's about, finding that middle ground. And I think for most partners, through communication and negotiation, you're able to find things that you can both enjoy. And so that's really where I come in to help. All right, I hear you wanting this, or this is something you're interested in. Let's kind of find that middle ground and see what we can find as an alternative so you can explore your sexuality together and find something that works for both of you.
Excellent. So a compromise.
Absolutely. Compromise is the key to healthy sexuality. If you can't compromise, then really you're not getting your needs met.
A real one for a lot of people have medical conditions that affects their sexual desire or sexual drive. And one in particular is hypertension. There's others as well. But a very common one when people are on high blood pressure medications or have had long-term illnesses such as diabetes or kidney disease, cancer, many different things, that it's not that they don't want to. The desire is not there, or the functionality for a lot of men is no longer there because of medications. How do you address that? That weighs heavy on the individual that's dealing with the medical illness, as well as in the relationship where, someone is still very virile, if you will, and, and it can be frustrating for people. And I've known of cases where some people have actually divorced in the situation because the other partner was unable to perform anymore sexually.
Exactly. It's not only frustrating, but it's isolating because if you're dealing with a medical condition, your sexual drive may be the last priority as far as treatment. So it can feel isolating because you may not feel good in your body. you may be on medication that you have to take and there's not an alternative that may have sexual side effects like low libido or cause problems with arousal, or for males may include issues with functioning like erectile issues or ejaculatory concerns. And because of that, I think it's important to know what are alternative ways that you can deal with the low libido or drive while you're coping with this medical illness.
Exactly. What can you do
What can
to
you
satisfy your partner?
Exactly. And what I try to encourage people to think about is, even though you're going through these conditions, it doesn't mean you can't keep connection going in your relationship. Keep intimacy going. And so even if your body's not working or functioning the way you need it to, keep connection, spend time together. Even if you're not able to have the sexual activity that you're used to, keep connecting, whether that's date nights or time in sensual intimacy. So I encourage people to keep that going, even if that drive's not there. So I think the drive tends to lead to expectations around sex. If I don't have this high libido, or if I'm not feeling that desire, then nothing happens as far as intimacy. So I encourage people to continue to find that connection in whatever way they can. Because the longer we go without it, the harder it is to get going again and get back in a good rhythm that works for you.
Is there also somewhat of where you may do a compromise between a couple of any type of couple where, say, talking works, but then some couples are like, okay, I've talked, but I want something. Mm-hmm. So is that something that maybe sometime you sit down and talk to both couples of what could satisfy as an alternative in this situation where a person is unable to perform in one ways? What other sexual ways or intimacy ways that they could provide pleasure to their partner?
Yes, I would say this is the fun part of sex therapy because it's about being creative. And what's interesting is our sexuality and our creativity are very closely connected. Mm-hmm. I believe that's what libido is. It's our life force that drives us towards things that bring us pleasure. Mm-hmm. So if we can be creative in how we're engaging in sex, that can help a couple get past that hurdle where they're not able to do the things that they're used to or that they may expect that they're supposed to do when it comes to sex. And that may be things like sensual intimacy, touch. Most couples that I meet with are very touch deprived in their relationship. Mm-hmm. And by that I mean if they're not having sex, everything seems to go. They're not kissing, they're not cuddling, they're not touching in ways that really bring that pleasure or closeness and connection. Mm-hmm. So that's where I start. I really get couples to start touching again, getting back into their sexuality. I may recommend things like dance. I love dance because it's a way that we move our bodies. It can be fun. It's a way that really evokes your self-esteem and you feel good. And it's a very erotic practice too, depending on what kind of dance you're doing. Yes. So it can be just looking at different types of activities that can bring people into their bodies, embodied, and also get them to explore their sexuality in different ways.
There is a difference between sex and intimacy. Can you define that for us?
Yes. People always want to know that. What is what? And is one the other?
Yes,
or I'll meet with people and they'll say, I'm having problems in intimacy, but they're referring to sex. So sex is a form of intimacy. And intimacy, there are actually 12 facets of intimacy. We can have emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, aesthetic intimacy. We can have recreational intimacy. Intimacy is really when we connect with others and get to be our true selves. We let the guard down and we really open up ourselves to another human being. We can be intimate with friends. We can be intimate with lovers, partners, family, even our pets. So intimacy is something that is so at the core of our being. I believe that humans are so connected and driven by intimacy. We're social beings. We need to be connected in that way. So sex is an important form of intimacy because I think it's really what we all have in common. It's how we all got here. It's the one thing that, creates a lot of distress for people, but also a lot of joy. And so people are really driven by wanting that connection, wanting romance and connection and partnership in their life. So sex is really a creative way in which we find that connection with other people.
That is excellent because many people suffer from intimacy and yet they have sex in marriages, in partnerships, in just, couples or non-couples, or a lot of single people long for intimacy, and they do intertwine intimacy with sex. And you can have sex and not have intimacy is what I'm hearing.
Yes. Unfortunately, a lot of people have concerns around that. So they may have, we want to look back at early childhood relationships. We can have attachment wounds in our early life that can lead to barriers in intimacy. So it's important to look at your entire upbringing and development to see how intimacy was formed early on in life. I believe there's a wiring or mapping that happens early on in life that can help even determine how we act in our romantic relationships. So as a clinician, I look a lot at attachment styles. How do we attach? How do we get our needs met in relationships? And believe it or not, a lot of that is set up from our early relationships from our caregivers. So if we look at that, it can sometimes help overcome intimacy issues that people deal with, or if people are having a lot of sex but not connecting with others, really help heal some of those attachment wounds and help them have better, more fulfilling relationships.
Thank you for that. That is so important because a lot of it has stemmed from childhood issues that people have suffered from, and that trickles into their adult life. So many people have dealt with sexual trauma, either from rape, molestation, abuse, and it affects their ability in their relationships to deal with intimacy and other areas of their life. But what can be done to start the healing process? Because those traumas sometimes linger for years when they've been molested as children, or even when they get to teenagers or adulthoods where they've been sexually assaulted or raped, whether you're male, female, bisexual, transgender, all types of people have dealt with sexual violations in their life. But what I want to talk about is how to start the healing process, because we want the people to be healed and go forward in life. And it's hard, it's painful, but it's also healthy to start the healing. So talk to us about that.
Trauma is so prevalent in our culture, and I think we have a lot of statistics around what that is. 1 in 3 people have been sexually assaulted or dealt with some form of abuse, and I imagine those numbers are much higher if we think about all the people that aren't reporting their abuse. So when it comes to trauma, I think we have to acknowledge how to treat trauma. So we have really great facilities and treatment centers, or even psychologists like myself who specialize in trauma and can help people address how to deal with trauma from a neurological basis, understanding how it's programmed into your nervous system, to helping to address trauma from the basis of how it affects social relationships. So I think it's important to go to the proper treatment and resources to address trauma. And so it's important for people to get help. If you don't get help, trauma will stay with you and affect your life throughout your life. Again, it's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's very common, and I would think most of us have dealt with some form of trauma in our life. When I find I'm working with people, I would say the number one thing I see often is people saying, I never thought that was trauma. So I was abused or assaulted or dealt with some sort of violation in my life, but I never called it that. And so sometimes just naming it can be part of the healing process. Very
good. And also many people may not correlate that with going to a sex therapist to address trauma.
Exactly. They may go to a medical doctor because they may deal with physical ailments that are part of their trauma response, but actually going to a therapist or specialist sometimes is the last step to getting help. And that's unfortunate because it can have quite an impact on your life, and it's really important to get the right treatment. So there's a lot of new research and innovations around how to work with trauma. So I think it's important that if you are looking for a therapist or a doctor to work with, that you make sure that they have that specialization so they're providing the right treatment that you may need.
I agree with that. I was looking at some of the testimonies on your site where people lives have been helped and healing. So thank you for your area of expertise and those lives that you're touching on a day-to-day basis. And I'm hoping that some of the audience that are listening will, at the end, we're going to give them your contact information, because this is such a unfortunate, prevalent situation in our society where people have addressed that. I've had family members, I've had friends, and different ones that have had forms of sexual assault. And I want to see them healed, as well as any other person that I may not know have a healing in their life as it relates to sexual assault and abuse.
Absolutely. I mean, we all need sexual healing in so many ways, whether it's, lack of information or education, or coming from backgrounds that were very sex negative. So I think there's so many forms of trauma that we can work on and we can heal. And, we can heal as a community by even what you're offering today, this topic for people to hear and be more aware of, I think is part of sexual healing. So
Yes.
I thank you as well for bringing
Thank
this
you.
topic to everyone's awareness.
Thank you. So one question came up, is masturbation healthy? There is, especially in certain religions and cultures, that people don't feel you should masturbate. But is it healthy for a person to masturbate for themselves? And what does that do? How does that help you in your own sexual health, masturbation?
Oh, my favorite topic. I love talking about masturbation because it's something that we don't talk about enough.
Yes.
And my answer is yes, absolutely. It's very healthy. And the first reason is it's a way for you to get in touch with your own body. So I always tell people the relationship we have with our body is the longest relationship we have in life. So masturbation is something that is a way for you to connect with your body. So if you can't pleasure your own body, it's going to be very difficult for you to show a partner what to do as far as pleasuring your body. It gives you awareness of your sexuality. It helps you attune with your anatomy in your body in ways that a partner may not be able to do. So I really encourage it. And when it comes to masturbation, it's not about the goals, orgasm, or the end goals of masturbation, but it does help really condition our bodies for better sex. So the more we masturbate, I really feel it improves your potential for pleasure with a partner. So when I find that people may have difficulty with orgasm or arousal, I encourage them to masturbate as a way to really prime their bodies for better pleasure.
You actually segued into my next question, is about orgasms. You still have some people, particular women, that have never experienced an orgasm, or some that haven't often experienced orgasm. So I was just going to say, what advice do you have for people that never had that or struggle with that feeling of release from an orgasm?
Yes. Well, first of all, we have to know what an orgasm is. An orgasm is a reflex, like a sneeze. So it's not something that we're just born being able to do. It is a learned response. So because it's a learned response, we have to prime our bodies and condition our bodies to orgasm. So when I find that people haven't orgasmed or are not able to orgasm, maybe that priming or wiring hasn't been developed early on, and maybe that was from coming from a conservative background where they weren't encouraged to self-stimulate, or they have a lot of shame around their sexuality or genitalia, and they don't feel comfortable touching their own bodies. So because orgasm is a learned response, we have to learn how to do it. So a lot of my work in my practice is helping people understand or learn how to orgasm. Probably one of my favorite concerns to work with, because it can be such an empowering experience to teach someone how to orgasm. Learning your anatomy is the first step. Being able to use devices or products that can enhance that learning process. So I encourage all women to have a vibrator. It's one of the most effective sexual health devices we have, and it can be a really great primer for improving your orgasm potential, and also just getting comfortable with touching your body in different ways. So the great thing about female bodies is that we have so many potentials for orgasm. We can have multisensory orgasms. There are over 10 different orgasm types we can have in our bodies. So we're really wired for all of this potential when it comes to our pleasure. So it's just about learning how to access it and getting those nerve endings firing. And that's the exciting part, because I think when I meet women that can't orgasm, they feel so much shame. What's wrong with me? Is my body broken? I hear that often. Or, something's wrong with me. I'm not normal. And I think that's such a common thing I hear too. I'm not normal, or something must be wrong with me. But really it's not. It's just about getting all of those connections made within the body and learning that response. And then you're ready to go.
Just like a sneeze.
Just like a sneeze, exactly.
I like that.
And some of them are small and some of them are big. And I think I always call Hollywood's version of sex, these big glamorous orgasms and everything looks great. Honestly, that's really not the reality. Some orgasms are like a blink of an eye and they're done. We can have multiple orgasms. Exactly. They all vary and they're never going to be the same. So I think that's important, even though every sexual experience is different. So we don't want to normalize our sexual experiences. We just want to be open to all of the potential that we can have.
I like when you said that normalized, because I do think that it is individual, is it not? And
Absolutely.
What one person's pleasure or experience is very different than someone else's. And I think it's important that everyone understand that it's individual. So what could you recommend that we, as a takeaway to use in our baskets at home? Living Your Life Without Limits is about giving people tools and resources that not only they can use on the outside, but we can incorporate in our everyday life. And it's important that we have a healthy sexual outlook for ourselves as individuals. What would you recommend that we do to foster that?
Yes, because I believe that sexual health is a part of overall health and well-being, that it needs to be prioritized, just like any other aspect of our health.
Excellent.
So we need to put time into it. We need to not assume that everything is always working, and that we want to be realistic about expectations around sex. And because we're changing pretty much daily when it comes to our sexuality, if we think about things like energy levels and hormones and lifestyle factors that are affecting our sexuality, we have to be able to cope with the changes rather than stigmatize those changes. And I think if we can cope with the changes, we'll know what to do, and we can ride those waves more easily and still be healthy in our sex life. And by healthy, I mean we are prioritizing, we're making it something that we believe is important in our life, just like any other aspect of our day-to-day living. And we also don't take it for granted. We want to make sure that it's something that we put energy and time into, and we're always learning. I think sexuality is something that is always something we can learn, and we want to make sure that we're taking the time to do that.
So if I'm hearing correctly, the ownership is with us.
Oh, it is. It's absolutely your responsibility.
Because oftentimes we put the ownership on someone else to satisfy us sexually.
Right. And that's a learned message if you think about it.
It is.
We've learned that, it's my partner's responsibility to give me the orgasm or give me that pleasure. And all of these messages that we've learned, and there's a lot of bad ones out there, really mixed messages or negative messages around sex, they affect us, especially how we get our needs met or how we may approach sexual concerns as they come up in our life.
Are there classes also that you and your team offer or are out there in the community? I'm going back to when you talked about intimacy and touching and teaching people how to do that, to pleasure each other. I know that there's talking and conversing and communicating, but is there such courses or something that is offered in a healthy environment where people can go for, training or education, if you will?
Yes. I mean, there are so many. It really depends on what you're looking for. If you want something very experiential, which means we're going to actually learn and do the skills that are being taught, there are workshops like that. I'm actually doing a couples workshop on February 9th, right before Valentine's Day. That's about learning sensuality, which is a big part of sexuality. So sensuality is really engaging the senses as a form of pleasure, really learning to be embodied through touch. So it's going to be a great workshop for couples to learn some really new skills to bring into the bedroom to enhance sex that aren't just about the mechanics of sex, but are about bringing back our primal intimacy, which I believe is touch and eye contact through connection.
And where would people be able to find that and sign up for that if they were interested?
I actually have a link on my website. So if you go to drshannonchavez.com under events, you'll see some information on that event. It'll be in Sherman Oaks area. So if people are in the Valley area, I invite you or encourage you to come out and engage in a very fun workshop.
Excellent. Very good. One other question that someone had asked is, how can I boost my libido?
Yes. Boosting your libido. Well, libido is energy. So look at some of the energy drainers in your life. So, this misconception that libido is just sexual energy. I believe libido is pretty much all the energy we put towards things we desire. So we definitely have energy drainers in our life. One is devices. So if you're always connected to your cell phone, you're watching a lot of television, these are libido drainers. So I would find the things in your life that tend to be taking energy away and try to do a detox or cleanse from those items for a while and see if you notice your libido change. Another common one is underlying health issues. So things like autoimmune disease, health issues, there can be quite an effect to libido there. So if you do have any health concerns, you want to make sure you're addressing those properly and making sure that you're on the right protocol to help boost libido. So I usually find that people have quite a bit of other underlying health issues that aren't being addressed. And the other is stress, one of the biggest libido killers I see. Stress isn't necessarily going to go away, but we can learn how to manage it more effectively. And that can be just learning how to take care of your body better, learning how to meditate, relax, breathe, things that can really help you become more embodied and healthy throughout your body. So there are a lot of methods that can help reduce stress, but I find that if you reduce stress, you'll notice a boost in libido right away.
Excellent. I understand you recently wrote a new article regarding millennials. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. The question was, why are millennials having less sex? And so I kind of dived into what are some of the things going on in our culture that are affecting sexuality. So I talked about technology and just the way people are connecting now, how people are meeting one another, dating sites, and the ways in which we are approaching relationships, and even casual sex and how that's changed over the years. And so this is a topic that I think a lot of people are interested in. And so I especially talk about technology because that's something that I don't think is going anywhere, but it's definitely affecting the way we communicate, connect, and also it's something that we're all plugged into. So it absolutely affects our sexuality, whether it's how we're getting information or how we're meeting people. And so it's important for people to recognize that these trends in our culture can affect our sexuality overall.
And you're finding the perspective between the millennials and my generation or beyond is very different. What is the key differences that you're finding out when talking to the different age groups?
I would say it's definitely how we're getting our information, and also some of the trends going on culturally. So whether that's things like politics and how that's affecting us on an emotional level, because we have access to this information, we tend to be more connected to what's going on, and it can affect us on an emotional level, whether it's politics or climate change or all of these major social issues. Not that it wasn't important in previous generations, but because we have so much access to this information, it's affecting us on all levels. We're bombarded with these messages, so it's going to affect us on an emotional level. We feel sometimes personally responsible for making change, and that we have to advocate for making change around these topics going on in our culture, where before we really didn't have that access or ability to do, to be a part of that advocacy or change as we do today.
And it's very interesting how you pull that into how it affects our sexual health. I never thought of it on that wise. You think of them as separate, but they're actually all connected together.
It's all connected because, again, we talked about libido drainers.
Yes.
And if you're constantly bombarded with, politics and climate change and all these things, it's going to emotionally impact you. And that may drain your ability or desire to want to connect in an intimate or sexual way.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having that. And where can our listeners find that article?
So the article will be posted on my website soon. So you can go to my website, drshannonchavez.com, and I'll have a link to the article.
If there was one thing you would like to leave with the audience today as a final note for them to take with them, what would that be you'd like to say to the listeners today?
I would like the listeners to know that it's really your responsibility to take control of your sex life. And if you do, it can be very rewarding. So take control, be empowered around your sexuality, really try to reduce the shame and talk about it. Talk about it with your friends, your lovers, partners, anyone around you. I think the more we start talking about sex, the more we reduce that shame and we make it a priority in our lives. So that's really what I do and why this is the work that I do. It's my mission to help people talk about sex and really get rid of the shame and embrace sexuality in a way where it can help in your life.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chavez. This has been extremely informative, and I am so excited that we brought this to this forum. It is so important that we have a healthy outlook on sexual health. And with your area of expertise and knowledge, you've certainly got us on the right track. I want you to know, Living Your Life Without Limits family, Dr. Chavez is going to be joining us in the near future. We're going to work out the details where she's going to be joining in one of our upcoming workshops so that we can really even let go even further in there. So stay tuned for more. I want to thank you, the listeners, for joining us for such an important topic. Please log on to Dr. Chavez's website. Dr. Chavez, would you give us that information again?
Sure. It's www.drshannonchavez.com. And there's a lot of great information on there. There's articles I've written and just a lot of really helpful resources around sexual health. And I also offer a 15-minute complimentary phone consultation for anyone that may be interested in sex therapy or even looking for the right resources and needing some direction. So please, I encourage everyone to utilize that resource and reach out if needed.
We're going to also have that attached to our website so that you can find it very easily. Again, I thank you for joining me for this wonderful episode on Let's Talk About Sex with none other than Dr. Shannon Chavez. It has been our honor and privilege to have her with us today. Remember, family, to love yourselves and take care of yourselves, because guess what? You're worth it. See you next week. Take care and have a nice day. Bye-bye.